Charisma Quotient. I'm your host, Kim Seltzer, a dating and makeover expert, where I will help you build confidence, make connections, and find love from the outside in. Do you know what your brand voice is when it comes to dating? So here's the thing. A brand voice in business represents the personality of a company and a product, in addition to the logo and the colors and the slogan and the tagline and all that jazz that, goes into business that make up a brand story. The brand voice is what binds it all together. What you say and how you say it will set the tone and is essential in forming your identity. A brand voice helps consumers identify your brand from others, just like your voice is distinguishable from other people. So, what if you apply these principles to how you show up, dress up, and communicate your brand when it comes to dating? And most importantly, are you speaking your truth to who you are in an authentic way? I find that a lot of people do what I call shape shifting, right? Which is you kind of morph into something that other people want of you or want to see of you, so that you create an inauthentic connection. And that's why lopsided situations in relationships happen. I remember there was a man who I was working with who had a history of people-pleasing behavior. And he was in a marriage where he constantly did things for his wife. And he admitted that when he first met her, he wasn't entirely into her, but he didn't have a lot of dating experience, and he just kind of fell into the vortex of the relationship and really fast. And guess what he did? He was shape-shifting into what she wanted of him. Fast forward to by the time I met him, he had divorced her after 15 years of marriage and felt completely lost in who he was and how to date. And his identity really had been wrapped up with his wife and what he did for her. And so there he was with no identity. He did not have a voice, or a brand voice for that matter, and definitely didn't have a great wardrobe. So we had to start there. And he needed to figure out his dating brand. What was so beautiful about this story, I mean, obviously we did a lot of things together in ways of coaching, but when he was talking about not having a voice, I gave him a simple direction, and that was every single day I wanted him to get on some sort of recording of his voice where he would talk about his feelings and express what he wanted on a daily basis in ways of like a vlog. Well, he took it upon himself to go on Facebook Live. This was back in the day when Facebook Live was really big, and he started expressing himself on Facebook Live. And before he knew it, he had all these people following him, mostly men, who were chiming in saying, "Me too." And he created this beautiful community. From there, he went to one of my retreats, and he came there with a whole new mindset, and he definitely was gaining his confidence. And he said to the group, he said, "I want to start a podcast, but I'm scared that no one will listen." And I said, "Who in this room would listen to this man over here?" And everyone stood up and clapped, and he started crying. And from that moment on, he started his podcast. And to this day, he has an amazing podcast. He has his voice, and he has the girl. And it was all because he had to express his authentic self and use his brand voice to attract what he wants. Your true brand and voice is crucial in attracting authentic potential partners. And when you speak your truth and show the real you, you will have deeper connections, reciprocal relationships, and be more expressive in your thoughts and feelings. And with me today is the king of finding a brand voice and speaking the truth, who is going to help me talk more about all of this and how I'll tie that all in and how you can use it to better your dating life. As a stand-up comedian playing gigs across the country, he discovered his voice, and now he helps clients find theirs, saying, "Before you brand yourself, find yourself." Oh, I love that. He hosts 2 shows ranked in the top 2% of the Apple podcasts globally, and is the founder of Human Eyes, a personal interface for reviewing, editing, and elevating an AI-generated output, creating a space where artificial meets actual. Welcome, Hersh Rephun. Did I say it right? But you have to unmute yourself and unveil yourself.
All right. Well, say it again. The last name. How did you?
Rephun.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh my God, I said it
That's
right.
correct. Ding, 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 ding,
Ding,
ding,
ding,
ding.
ding. I get a
You
reward.
win,
We had this
Kimmy.
whole...
You're a winner.
I know. And I mean, more importantly, thank you for coming on the show. I'm
My pleasure.
super excited to have this conversation with you. And we discovered offline we have a lot in common with you having a comedic background, but we crossed paths. You went from LA to the Midwest. I went from Midwest to LA, but here we are meeting at the Charisma Quotient. So,
yep.
I guess, I would love to start out just by hearing more of your story. Like, I don't know your backstory and what got you into all of this.
Well, I was bitten by an electromagnetic spider. My story. Okay, well, all right. So I grew up in Miami originally. I have to start following the sun better. I did okay for a while. I went from Miami. I went to School of Visual Arts in New York and studied originally filmmaking, and then I was convinced to study advertising. And I never saw myself as being a copywriter or advertising person, but I always thought I would be more in show business, more in comedy, improv. I did a lot of improv in New York. I did stand-up comedy in New York, but I married very young, and we were having our first son, and I chose this job in advertising, which led to a whole eclectic career actually in advertising, PR, marketing, copywriting, and also circling back around again years later in LA to stand-up comedy again and producing content. And I think from about the time that I moved to LA, which was 97, I think I was starting to figure out that there was going to be some marriage of brand and content and this branded entertainment vision, which seems so hard to fulfill. It's like you look at brands and they've all tried to do what's considered entertainment, but it's sponsored by brand, but they can't quite get it right. But I've always surfed those two things, the comedy, advertising, with the concept that you have to sell the truth. You're selling the truth. You're not trying to snow anybody. You're not trying to fool anybody. Entertainment is a legitimate way of fulfilling a promise to the audience. And the brand aspect has now obviously taken on so much more meaning, because a personal brand, is really about who you are. Brand is who you are. It's your brand. It's what is your brand of humor? What is the way you talk to people? What is your manner? So I think helping companies and individuals with that, with their voice, is a real passion of mine. And as you mentioned, I learned that on the stage. I would do voices. I had an ear for voices as a kid. I could do dialects. I could do different things like that. And after doing so much stand-up, I finally started doing it in my own voice. And I was like, oh, this is really liberating. I don't know if it's as funny as a French accent or a British accent, but maybe those things are just affectations that I don't really need. Maybe the humor and the intelligence and the point of view are there, and I'm just piling all this stuff on top of it. So that's how I kind of became a voice expert, if you will.
No, that's really interesting. And how I was talking about the authenticity of your voice, and how that kind of breeds connection too. Because and even with comedy and when you see things out in entertainment, I think people really relate to, times where you are vulnerable and you're leaning into who you are in your voice and that kind of thing. So, because I was wondering, like back in the earlier days, did you find that you were using some of the comedy as a way of deflection and not being authentic?
I think it was almost the opposite. It was that
Ah,
the voices allowed me to be authentic, except I was authentic in a synthetic, outfit. It's like
Yeah.
as a British character or whatever it might be in this. And often it would be a reflection of who I was talking to,
Mm,
which can be, either embarrassing or offensive if they don't like it or they don't think it's funny. But quite
right.
often they just kind of thought it was funny, but it was a way of letting go of who I was put together as. And so as Hersh, having to be Hersh and be all the things that Hersh has to be, and then that was very heavy to me. So going into a new situation and just being British, and I could still be more or less myself, but I could inhabit life in a way that was liberating. And but it took a while to be as comfortable as myself on stage as I was doing the characters.
No, that makes total sense to me. I mean, actually, this is hot off the press. I just got back from one of my dating retreats that I did, and I did a lot of improv games in there with
Oh,
the
cool.
folks, and it was awesome. And we played freeze, as you probably
Yeah.
know that, right? Right.
Yeah.
And we played other games. And what was interesting is that it did exactly what you said. It gave a lot of the people permission to have a voice, express feelings in ways of a character that might
Yeah.
be kind of super scary otherwise.
Right.
And and they even talked about it afterwards, is that, wow, like they didn't know that they had it in them. For instance, there was a woman who um, she just keeps saying, I don't know how to flirt. I don't know how to flirt. I'm a bad flirt. And yet I gave her the role of being the biggest flirt on stage. And everyone was blown away because guess what? She was the biggest flirt.
Yeah.
But it was giving her that voice, that permission to do that. And like what you said, sometimes it takes kind of that distance to then merge to the authentic self at some point.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I wondered, like, for you, just applying this for dating, because you said that you had been married before, right? And like, how did your journey with your voice and shape your relationships?
Well, I think that I think that until very recently, probably a few years, let's say until the pandemic. I think there was if I think for everybody the pandemic's a turning point, a pivotal point, something like that. So, but I think I always had to tap into those voices and those personas, those liberated, colorful personas, to feel confident. And so when I got divorced, that was the only way that I could really feel like I could be confident,
Mm.
really. But it wasn't on the stage. I wasn't really doing stand up. I don't know what I was doing. I was working in advertising. I was working I was entertaining as a, in a business setting, but I wasn't doing the stage that much. But I started doing I had a writing partner. I had a writing partner. We wrote some screenplays together, and we wrote a TV pilot, and it was about a British. It was like kind of foretold the Osbournes. It was before the Osbournes, but it was about a British rock star who had blown his vocal cords out and had licensed his life rights to a documentary company so that he could pay his bills and keep his house. And it was called The Miserable Life of Ian Staines. And this character, I was doing this character, and I actually met my wife, my current wife. Her sister was in it, and we needed a voiceover, and her sister wasn't available, and she was available, and we just kind of became friends. It wasn't like anything crazy. We didn't know each other very well. And then I asked her out, and I think that moment, I kind of became at least more comfortable just being myself in a situation where I was like, okay, I'm divorced. I got 3 kids. My life's kind of a mess. I'm kind of like in an upheaval, and who knows where I'll land. And I'm doing this crazy, you know, show business thing. And then I got the advertising thing, the screenwriting. Who knows? I'm like, you feel vulnerable. I was at my most vulnerable. So let's put it that way.
Hmm.
So I think at that point I had, there wasn't any point in trying to charm with those other things, with the talent. The talent was good, was
Yes.
there, but it wasn't it wasn't what I was going to use. It was more just the honesty and the kind of just openness. And so I think that was a turning point. And then over the succeeding years, and that's like 18 years ago now. So I think over that time, I got way back into comedy, started out again with all the voices and all the stuff, and then just dropped them like on a dare almost. One of my buddies was like, just do it with it, like, no voices. I'll do your set. He says, I'll do your set with no accents, and you do my set with no voices. You do just my friend's kind of humor. And he goes, let's just switch sets tonight. Who cares? Nobody cares. And we go and we do a show, and we did that. And I was like, man, I like just telling stories and jokes, and I don't have to do the voice. But it was a very long separation. It took a long time.
I love that story, by the way. And
I
just
never
like,
told that story really that way. Certainly not. No, I've never really told that.
oh my gosh. Well, thank you for sharing it because I mean, I
Sure.
think so many people listening can relate to that. And it's like that journey of leaning into your authentic self. And I think there's so many people that I work with who feel that their self-value and their self-worth has to do with what they can deliver, what they can do. Their,
Yeah.
whether it is like the comedy and
Yeah.
like that's what I'll give, that's how I'll get the girl, or that's my value, or it could be anything like being successful and what that looks like. And the conversation is always when I have clients like that, I say, but who are you beyond that? Like what do
Mhm.
you offer somebody in ways of just who you are? And a lot of times people can't answer that. And that's the journey. So when you start like recognizing all that you are beyond what you can do for some people or your, work identity or whatever it is you're leading with, that's really when you get to see the people who like you for you and not for
Yeah.
what you can do. And that's the magic. So I love that story. Well,
Cool.
and I could see also like people listening and saying, yeah, but I mean that's easier said than done, right? Like how do I lean into that and find my brand voice with authenticity? What would you say to some people who are struggling with that?
Well, I think one place to start is a lot of people think of brand, even with authenticity, they think of it as something they show people. In other words,
Ah,
what's your brand? Oh, we're the crunchiest potato chip on the planet, let's just say. Um, but and then they figure out, well, what do they stand for? Everybody's conscious of their image, but it's image. It's like the PR side of what am I going to say I am? And same as with the voices, it's like that all that does is add another layer of distance between you and the people you're talking to. So yeah, I was liberated by being able to inhabit somebody else, but I wasn't closer to the person I was talking to. I'd be much closer talking to them just like this. So
mm,
so when you remove that filter, now how do you safely remove a filter as a brand, right? You don't want to just shove yourself out there in the world with no filter to speak of, but the filter is on the inside. The filter's like back here. You That's why when I say before you brand yourself, find yourself,
mm,
because the advice is, okay, look inward a little bit, think about who you are. Don't worry about the way you're presenting. Like I would tell clients, don't worry about the words. Like just talk to me. I do the words. That's what you're paying me for. I take what you tell me and I turn it into really good words, whether they're ads or emails or billboard. Doesn't matter. That's all just what the medium might be. But It's got to come from you and your heart and your passion. And I think a lot of people miss the boat on that. They hide that. Oh, well, that's
Yes.
personal. That's my personal thing. That's not for anybody else. Well, yeah, you can have your secrets of what you want to hold on to, but that's different from knowing who you are. Know who you are, and let that start to be what your image is about.
That is awesome and so powerful. And it so relates to dating, like, and you're in
Yeah,
that stage of marketing yourself, because I always say, like, how do you market yourself? Attracts love. And that was the title of my TEDx talk recently,
right.
because there's so many, I think, misconceptions of what what you should be doing to put yourself out there. And you're right. Like, a lot of times people get caught up in what other people want of you, or what, like, oh, even on the profile, people will put on things that are not really them, or they'll have someone else write their profile or whatever that is. It's like, I just helped a woman last night do that. And I just, like, just talk, like, brain dump.
Right.
What is it that you want? And that's the half the battle too, because a lot of people can't even answer that question. So until you get really clear, like, how are you supposed to attract the business, like in your case, or the person that you want? And that's really healthy, and that's, like, congruent with you, unless you know who you are and what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
love that.
sometimes you can be a person who doesn't know who you are and what you want. And if that's like I was in that moment, and if you are genuinely that, you know, that's still it's not necessarily a brand. I'm not the guy who doesn't know what he wants and is totally vulnerable and,
Right, right, right.
but, but the honesty is a brand, you know, that's also a brand, you know, and so I feel like there's, there's a marriage to be made between the raw feelings, emotions that you have and the way you present them. You know,
Mhm.
it isn't just say what you feel, be what you feel, but there's a lot of work that you can do more just thinking about what you want and who you are. Though worrying about what the other people are going to think of it is the worst way to approach any kind of branding. you know
Yes.
just that
Yes.
it's just doomed for personal and otherwise. You go up to somebody and you meet them for the first time and you tell them what you think they want you to say, and you might as well have you know poured a bucket of ice over yourself. It just is doesn't
Well,
do.
I know, and not only that, as we're talking about, like, how exhausting that must
Yeah.
be too.
Oh
Like,
yes.
how much headspace that must take, and energetically, and you listening, if this is you and you're, like, always in your head and you're thinking so much about pleasing
Yeah.
others or what others think of you, that no wonder it's exhausting, like approaching a woman, or, like, expressing your feelings to your partner, or whatever that looks like. So, yeah, like, what would you say to someone who is scared? I mean, just, like, really fearful of leaning into that kind of vulnerability and finding out who they are.
Well, I do acknowledge that it's an emotion. Emotions are not solved with intellectual reasoning, right? So I could say to myself, I have nothing, there's nothing to be afraid of, like stage fright, right?
Exactly.
The stage fright isn't brain surgery. I mean, nobody's going to die on the table there if you are completely not funny, you know.
Right, right,
That would be a funny like film almost, or a funny little bit where a guy goes on
right.
stage and he just does a terrible job, and there's someone in the audience who's dead, and they're like, he's dead.
Yeah,
He's
exactly.
it's like
Wait,
you were
but you
so bad that the
yes.
person died. And it's like, well, that's not going to happen. But at the same time, I think, maybe lean into your fear a little bit.
Yes.
Think of what fear really is. When in these situations, social situations, we don't think of fear as the equivalent or the real motivator of hate, right? We don't think about hate when we're in a social situation, we're trying to meet somebody. But the fact is, fear is what hate really is. Hate is just a manifestation of fear.
100%.
And so there is no such thing as hate without it. It doesn't exist without fear. And so when you think about fear that way and you're like, well, I don't want to, I don't want to be a part of that. That's like a very negative and very, I'm just going to choose the best case scenario. I do tell that to people. Just assume the best case scenario. You ever like have somebody say something, or worse, text or email something, and you're not sure what they meant, and you're like, oh shit, they hate me, they're angry at me, they're belittling me, and it's like, well, just find the most positive interpretation of what they wrote and assume that that's what they meant, and write back, assuming that you took it not outlandish, but just assume that it's the best possible interpretation and write back. And then if they really meant it in a certain way, they'll write back and
They'll tell you,
more explicitly, right?
Right. And then more importantly, just pick up the phone and talk about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and this is a whole other, direction. But I love that whole like leaning into fear. In fact, I don't know if you ever played this game. There was an improv game, and actually this relates to myself too, where you have to play up something that you think you're really bad at or suck at.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Okay.
So I remember I was in class, and way back when, and this may humor a lot of you who know me, is that I thought I sucked at storytelling. Me, who like
Okay.
teaches storytelling. That's what's so
Right.
funny about it, people who know me. And I went up on stage and I played up being a really bad storyteller. And it was so bad that it was good, that everyone said it was the best scene ever,
Right.
And it
Right.
was a big lesson that I learned from that like, it's exactly what you're saying, is that often what we think is horrible and huge in our head is actually beautiful to other people, or they don't even
Yeah.
see it. Right. And so when we lean into that, we advertise that and just make it funny, or like just being more relaxed into it and just state
Yeah.
it, like stating how you feel, like, okay, I felt really dumb there, instead of hiding it. I think
Yeah.
that is part of finding your voice, right?
You could go on a stand-up stage and do nothing but confess your fears
Yeah.
to the audience, and I guarantee you that they would laugh, and that they would be more relaxed. Not even that you would be more relaxed, they would be relaxed. You get up, and I'm not, this isn't even something that I, some kind of tremendous insight that I came upon. I literally witnessed it. There was a comedian, and he was on stage, and he was nervous, and it was an open mic, so it's, people are used to like somebody being for the first time, and he turned away from the audience and he said something like, oh man, you're making me so nervous. And everybody laughed, and that release was what he needed to feel like, okay, they're not tense now.
Yes.
So I can relax. Now, it's not going to turn around and be the biggest set of his life, but at the same time, you could literally confess your fears and be completely at ease once you've done
I
it.
love that. I love that.
The other side of your fears is a very bold and courageous place,
That's awesome. It's so funny because this weekend I did party quirks with them,
Uh-huh.
and that's another like
Yeah.
improv game. And so what I did is I took the things that they thought they were bad at, and I made them that character. Right.
Yeah.
And so like the one who didn't think she was a flirt, like whatever it was. And to your point, there was so much humor that came out of it. Like you said, that release, I think that is so important. Well, and it brings me to another question, and I think you'll have a really insightful answer, because there's a fine line between you using humor to deflect and using humor to release. Can you
Uh-huh.
talk about that a little bit?
Oh, wow. That's really great, Kimmy. Well, because I started I have a couple of podcasts. One of them is called Truth Tastes Funny, which I started because truth tastes funny, because we were coming out of the pandemic. There's a lot of chaos. Nobody even knows what truth is. But if we do know what reality is, like something really happens and we're dealing with it, we need humor to diffuse the tension. But I believe that the difference between deflecting and diffusing is that diffusion can actually be permanent. You can actually accept something once you diffuse the tension. With deflecting, all you're doing is putting it off. It's still there, So, that's where I learned about this self-deprecation trap that we fall into. I was a victim of my own self-deprecation for years and years. And sometimes it was even so obvious as to not be uh, taken seriously. Like, oh, I suck at that, or I can't,
Yeah.
so and so could do that. I can't do that, and it's also kind of a false modesty where it's like you just don't volunteer for something you're really good at or that you could do. It could be subtle too. But I think when you use humor to make fun of yourself and deflect some of the pain and do all that stuff, you're not solving the problem. You're just delaying it, Whereas if you can just take, the truth tastes funny thing is that, you can swallow it, you can take it. You can take the truth. It's not going to taste great. It may be a little funny, may taste a little funny, but you can get it down. Just get it down. Take your medicine. And so that's where I think the diffusion is a way more useful tool than
That's fantastic.
deflection.
Yes. Yeah. There's a fine line because I know
Yeah.
I see that even like on first dates or, people will use humor to just either put themselves down, which is almost off-putting, or they'll deflect themselves, so they don't really
Right.
they're not real, kind of thing. So
Right.
that's good.
Well, you look at comics like Rodney Dangerfield or
Hmm.
Joan Rivers, Phyllis Diller, where they would make fun of themselves constantly, and clearly earlier on they had been made fun of or somebody made fun of them, but they knew that when the light went off, they were the one who was standing on that stage. They were the hero in that moment, even if they're talking about, their house dress or their doctor hates them or their parents dropped them off and left them in the woods, whatever it
Right.
was.
Right.
They may have had terrible, terrible parents in some cases or experiences, but they know I'm here, and it took them a while to get there. Roseanne too, but it took them a while to get there, but they reclaimed their dignity by not deflecting it. That isn't deflecting it. See, they're
Right.
they're making a joke at their expense, but they're not deflecting it. They're in charge. Dolly Parton
Yeah.
said the same thing. People used to make fun of her being so buxom and all of that stuff, and her image. And she said, "Yeah, but I've created this image. I know exactly what I'm doing. I control it." And she's a brilliant woman, a brilliant songwriter and philanthropist and all that stuff. And she knew. She's like, "Look, I just figured I gotta dress the thing. I have to take the power out of the hands of the viewer and the audience and put it in my own hands."
Yeah, right. Because it takes also she knew in that case, it's like, there's focus there. And
Yeah.
instead of having the elephant in the room, it's
Right.
actually saying, here I am. I know it and I'm
Right.
in control of it.
Right.
And so I know that's a great way of looking at. Oh my God, Hersh, I could go on and on with you. I'm like looking at the time, like, oh my God, how do we get here? Um, all right. So I have a fun request.
Oh,
Can we
okay.
please hear some voice that you do I don't know, maybe it's like your specialty voice. Maybe you can give like parting words of wisdom in that voice, but I think that'd be
Right.
really fun.
Right. Yeah, it's so funny. It is. I used to think that I couldn't go like 10 minutes without doing a voice, and now it's like pulling teeth. to get me to do it. But what, you know how it is when you talk about
I
it.
do.
Um, but let me see, because I'm debating whether to do like
Ooh.
an impression or just a voice, a dialect. Dialects only work, the dialects work when there's a certain situation. I'll throw this story out because it'll give me a chance to do the dialect, but
Okay,
but
perfect.
it's a true story, and it has to do with branding.
Okay, great.
So I was at the headquarters of Birkenstock, the very famous German
I've heard of
footwear
them.
brand. Yes, you've heard of them. And I was at their I've done a lot of footwear marketing, sneaker marketing, all kinds of
Oh,
stuff. So
cool.
I'm a kind of a creative director in that world. So I was at their headquarters in San Francisco, and the CEO of Birkenstock America is David Kahn, who's since become a very good friend of mine, is introducing me, but he's like, you got to do something fun. He knows my shtick that I do, and at that time he had seen me do many things, and he goes, just do a little something, like I'll introduce you around because they don't know you. Just it'll be fun. So I say, well, introduce me as Hans Schrag. Tell them my name is Hans Schrag, and I am the innovator behind the Birken bus. And he says, what's the Birken bus? And I said, don't worry about it. We'll go. And he says, okay, this is everybody. This is Hans Schrag. He's working with us on the new Birken bus thing. And that was all I needed. And then I was like, well, the Birken bus, the brilliance of the Birken bus is you start in San Francisco, yeah? And you stop in every retail store, every shop of Birkenstock across the country, and you're bringing them new styles for free for anyone who comes out with their Birkenstocks. Their Birkenstocks more than 20 years old. You're giving them the new one, and it's like it's a miracle. It's like a miracle, and it's the Birkenbus, and we do a whole tour and about halfway through it, David was like, "Well, hold on a second. Let's get our VP of marketing here." And I ended up doing a presentation that we have yet to do it. We haven't actually. I did present it as high up as the chairman of the entire company, but they don't need to do that kind of advertising because I think at this point in their storied career, I could actually hurt them. It's like, yeah, you think that's funny, but it's really, if somebody doesn't like it, one guy's like, that asshole from the bus. But
Oh my
so
God, that's brilliant.
That's a one that comes out of German one I used to do I used to do a lot of German showmen. I don't know why. I did a whole stand-up thing where I sang and danced, and the idea was that I had gotten separated from my orchestra and my animals and my other, the whole, like, if you imagine a whole Siegfried and Roy show, Vegas show,
hilarious.
and then I show up at the venue, and I'm either at the wrong venue or I got separated from the team, and now I have to do this show without all the fanfare. And that was a stand-up bit I did.
Oh my God. Well, thank you for that. That was
My
really
pleasure.
fun. I will have to have you come back on and with somebody completely different. No, something completely different. Oh my gosh. Well, Hersh, thank you so much for coming on. And it was a really interesting conversation. And I think you just helped a lot of people give that permission to really like find your voice in an authentic way. And is there any like kind of parting words of wisdom that you wanted to share? And also like how people can find you and your podcast?
Yes. Well, the easiest way to find me,
Yes,
now
darling.
that you've got me started, it's going to become
chicken not stood.
now I'm going. Yeah. Now I'm going. If you were British, I would be doing that. I do that with my friends. You can, if you search my appearances, and you'll see the British hosts. I just end up doing a British accent because it makes sense. What was the question? I'm sorry. Parting words.
Parting words. Where can people find you?
Where can people find me? Well, I think they can go to getmessagetherapy.com, which is always a good way to find me. If they see my name spelled out in the show notes or whatever, it's hershrephun.com also. But But a lot of people do, therapy is losing the stigma of being a shameful and bad thing. So if you're a brand or you're working on your dating skills and you want to approach it from a brand narrative point of view, then a little message therapy never hurt anybody.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. It
Thank
was
you,
super
Kimmy.
fun. And thank you for joining me today. You listening, this has been the Charisma Quotient, and I'm your host, of course, Kimmy Seltzer. Remember, you can build confidence, make connections, and find love from the outside in. And if you want to know more, make sure you go to my site, kimmyseltzer.com. And if you are attracting superficial or lopsided relationships in your life and want to get to more authenticity in your dating life, hop on a call with me and talk about ways that I can help you. Just click the link you see in the show notes. And remember, working on you is working on your dating life. That's all for now.